Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Houston Texans in their Week 17 matchup played January 3rd, 2016, as these two teams were going at it, and the Houston Texans, if they won, they would clinch the AFC South against their division rivals, the Jaguars. So we're going to go over the scores and the stats to give our breakdown and analysis for this game. And the Texans would score first, and it was actually set up with a turnover on downs by the Jaguars. They had went for it on a 4th and 4 from the Houston 42, and an incomplete pass turned the ball over on downs, and that would lead to a 29-yard field goal by Nick Novak with about 5.5 minutes left in the first quarter as Houston got on the board first to lead 3-0. The Jaguars would be held to a 3 and out, and now Texans would get the ball back, and they would go down the field 79 yards, and that would be capped off by a 12-yard touchdown pass from Brian Hoyer to Jonathan Grimes, and with the extra point by Novak, it was 10-0, and this was in the second quarter, less than a minute in. The Jaguars would respond with a field goal by Jason Myers, a 43-yarder, to put the first points on the board for the Jags, as it was now a 7-point game with the score Houston 10, Jacksonville 3, and that was with just over 10 minutes still left. Then after the Texans went 3 and out, the Jaguars would end up fumbling 2 plays later as Denard Robinson was hit by Cushing. He forced the fumble, and J.J. Watt would recover, and that would lead to a touchdown. Jonathan Grimes would score this time on the ground with a 3-yard run. Nick Novak hit the extra point, and that made it 17-3 with about 5.5 minutes left in the first half. Now both of these teams would punt on their next possessions, and then the Jaguars would end up with the ball with just over a minute left, about a minute and a half left, and then with 3rd and 10 from the 38, their own 38, Bortles was intercepted by Hall, and so now the Texans would take over on their own 25 after the interception, and they would get into field goal range, and Nick Novak would hit a 51-yard field goal with just seconds left on the clock in the first half to make it 20-3. So it was all Texans in the first half as they were capitalizing on the turnovers, and they would continue to do so in the second half. They actually would turn the ball over on downs themselves on their second possession of the second half, and then on the next possession, after holding the Jags to a 3 and out, they would end up throwing an interception. Hoyer was intercepted by House, and that would lead to a field goal by Jason Myers with less than a minute left in the third quarter, a 34-yarder that made it 20-6 as they cut the lead to 14. But Houston was still in control, up by 2 scores. They would end up missing a field goal on their next possession, though, as they brought the third quarter to a close. And in the fourth quarter, with a little over 11 minutes left to play in this game, Novak missed a 50-yarder. Jacksonville would take over at their own 40, and they would end up getting down into the red zone. But on 1st and 10 from the Houston 14, Blake Bortles was sacked by J.J. Watt. He forces the fumble. Mercilus recovers, and now Houston would take over on their own 25. They march down the field, and their drive would stall on the Jacksonville 33, and Nick Novak came out to hit a 51-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and it was now 23-6, Houston over Jacksonville with 3.5 minutes left to play in this game. And on the very next play from scrimmage after the kickoff, Kareem Jackson intercepts Blake Bortles and runs it back 27 yards for the interception for the touchdown, the pick 6. And with the extra point by Novak, it was now 30-6 Texans over the Jaguars. Jacksonville would end up getting the ball and bringing this game to a close as they got all the way down to the 10-yard line, but on the final play, Blake Bortles was sacked by Covington as this game came to a close. And the Houston Texans end up scoring 23 points off of turnovers, if you include that turnover on downs. So a huge performance by the Texans defense, giving their offense opportunities, also forcing those turnovers and just getting after the quarterback as they were putting heavy pressure on Blake Bortles all game. But in this game, Hoyer was 25 for 40, 249 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception as the Texans clinch the AFC South with a record of 9-7. They're 5-3 at home on the season. The Colts are now done. Jacksonville 5-11 on the year, 1-7 on the road. But as I said, Hoyer 25 for 40, 249 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Alfred Blue 21 carries for 102 yards as he was having a productive day. Jonathan Grimes had 2 touchdowns in this game. He had 4 carries for 26 yards and a rushing touchdown. He also had 4 receptions for 28 yards and a receiving touchdown as he ended up with 53 total yards in the game. DeAndre Hopkins, 7 catches for 89 yards. Strong had 6 catches for 56 yards for Jalen Strong. Then we look at Jacksonville's numbers. Blake Bortles, 17 of 32, 239 passing yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Jonas Gray had 9 carries for 23 yards to be their leading rusher. Allen Robinson, 5 catches for 108 yards in this game to be the leading receiver for Jacksonville. When we look at the kickers in this game, Jason Myers 2 for 2 on the field goals, did not attempt an extra point, and Nick Novak 3 for 4 on the field goals, 3 for 3 on the extra points. When we look at the defense in this game, J.J. Watt 3 sacks and a forced fumble for J.J. Watt in this game. Mercilus had 3.5 sacks and a forced fumble. It's the two of them just were really terrorizing Blake Bortles. Covington also had a sack as well, and Simon had a half a sack. And then Hall and Jackson each had interceptions in this game. And Cushing, of course, with that forced fumble as well. And for the Jaguars, House had an interception. Miller had a sack and a forced fumble. Oderick had a half sack, as did Thompson. We look at the team stats, 25 first downs for the Texans, just 11 first downs for the Jags. And on third down, the Texans, 8 for 17, 47% conversion rate. They went for it once on fourth, did not convert. Jacksonville was just 1 for 12 on third down, just 8% conversion rate. They went for it twice on fourth, and they were 1 for 2 for 50%. Total net yards in this game, 402 for Houston, 215 for Jacksonville, as the Texans had almost twice as many net yards. But on the ground, they really dominated as they had 5 times as many rushing yards, 160 rushing yards for the Texans netted, just 32 net yards on the ground for the Jags, as the Texans netted 5.2 yards per rushing play, just 2.3 for Jacksonville. And through the air, 242 for the Texans netted, as Hoyer was sacked twice, losing a total of 7 yards. And for the Jacksonville Jaguars, they netted 183 yards through the air, as Bortles was sacked 8 times in this game for a total of 56 yards lost. We look at the penalties in this game. 9 penalties against the Texans for 55 yards. 7 penalties against the Jags for 53 yards. Jacksonville fumbled the ball 3 times, recovered 1, lost 2. The Texans had a fumble, but they recovered their own fumble. In the red zone, Houston 2 for 3, 66%. Jacksonville 0 for 3 in the red zone, as the Texans defense came up huge in the red zone. They turned it into the dead zone. And the time of possession, 35 minutes, 37 seconds for Houston, 24 minutes, 23 seconds for Jacksonville. So the Texans coming up huge on defense, and they came up with a big effort. They needed to. They had their destiny in their own hands. They controlled their own fate. They needed to win. They stepped up. They came through big time in this game, and the defense just dominating those 8 sacks, plus forcing all those turnovers. They had the 2 interceptions and the 2 fumbles, the 4 turnovers, and also with the turnover on downs, they had 23 points between those 4 turnovers plus the turnover on downs. So they kept giving opportunities to the offense. The offense capitalized on those opportunities. Hoyer did have that 1 interception, but otherwise he was played pretty mistake-free. And Blue coming up big time on the ground. And that's what the Texans need to do. This is the recipe for success for Houston moving forward, as they're now in the playoffs. They are the AFC South champions. And if they can play like this, they can win some games in the postseason. If they can play like this on defense, if they can get their running game going, they can protect the ball on offense. Of course, they got to watch out for those interceptions, but this is a team that could be dangerous. In the AFC, things are a lot more open than they might seem, and it's really wide open in that AFC. Anybody can take it. The teams up top aren't as strong as they once were with all the injuries out there right now. You know, the Patriots are banged up, the Bengals are banged up, the Broncos are banged up. So you never know. One of these, you know, the Texans being the other division winner, and then you also we'll see what happens, you know, with the Chiefs and the Broncos, but more than likely the Broncos take the division, but the Chiefs, the Steelers, the Texans, the three teams that people aren't really expecting to do much in the playoffs could be the teams that could do something. You know, they have just as much of a shot as anybody else. They're in the postseason. Like I said, if they can play like they did today against the team that's really underrated in Jacksonville. So it's a really big performance for them to shut down that offense, a very explosive offense of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, they're a little banged up too, but I thought it was a big performance by Houston. This is what they needed, and it builds some momentum going towards the postseason and wild card weekend next week. So that'll be something to look forward to. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and having a great weekend and enjoying all the sports.